Picture two cities. City A, you wake up, walk downstairs, grab a coffee from the cafe on the corner, pick up groceries from a market next door, walk to work, meet a friend for lunch, all without once getting in a car. City B, you wake up, get in your car, drive to a coffee chain in a strip mall, drive to a grocery store in a parking lot the size of a small town, drive to work, drive to lunch, drive home. You have not walked more than 200 meters the entire day. City A is Paris. City B is Houston. Both are major cities in wealthy developed nations. One of them feels like a place. The other feels like a system for moving cars. This is a story of how that happened and why it was not an accident. Part 1. America started fine. Here is a part of this story that surprises most people. American cities were not always like this. The oldest American cities, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Charleston, were built before the car existed. They were built on the same principles as European cities. Walkable, dense, mixed use, human in scale. Boston's street plan is famously chaotic because it follows old cow paths and colonial-era property boundaries, exactly like a medieval European city. Nobody planned it from above. It grew from the ground up, from the daily decisions of people who walked everywhere. And it works. Boston's historic core is one of the most walkable urban environments in the world. New York's grid, laid out in the Commissioner's Plan of 1811, was directly inspired by Roman city planning. 12 avenues running north to south, 155 streets running east to west, every block measured, every intersection at right angles. Augustus Caesar would have recognized it immediately. The plan was radical for its time. New York in 1811 was a city of 100,000 people clustered at the southern tip of Manhattan. The grid extended across the entire island, planning for a city of millions that did not yet exist. It was an act of extraordinary urban ambition, and it worked. Manhattan's grid is one of the most successful pieces of urban planning in history. By the late 19th century, American cities had developed something that made them genuinely competitive with their European counterparts: the electric streetcar. By 1900, there were over 17,000 miles of streetcar tracks in American cities. Every major city had one. Los Angeles, yes, Los Angeles, had the largest electric railway network in the world. The Pacific Electric Railway, known as the Red Cars, connected 1,100 miles of track across Los Angeles County, linking the city to its suburbs in a network so comprehensive that you could travel from the beach to the mountains without a car. American cities at the turn of the 20th century were not broken. They were thriving, dense, connected, walkable, and served by one of the finest urban transit systems ever built. Part 2. The car takes over. 1908. Henry Ford introduces the Model T. For the first time in history, a car is cheap enough for ordinary working people to own. The price drops from $825 in 1908 to $260 by 1925. Cheaper than many horses. By 1927, 15 million Model Ts have been sold. America falls in love with the automobile with a speed and completeness that no one fully anticipated, including Ford himself. The car was genuinely liberating. For the first time, ordinary Americans could travel where they wanted, when they wanted, without depending on a train schedule or a streetcar route. The freedom was real. The problem was what happened next, when a tool of personal freedom became the organizing principle of an entire civilization. Here is the part of this story that sounds like a conspiracy theory. It is not. It is documented fact, confirmed by a federal criminal conviction. In the 1930s and 1940s, General Motors, Firestone Tire, Standard Oil, and Mack Trucks formed a holding company called National City Lines. Their purpose was simple: buy up electric streetcar systems in American cities and shut them down. Replace the electric streetcars with GM buses, then replace the buses with cars. They succeeded in over 45 cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, Detroit, Baltimore, Philadelphia. City after city, the red cars and the yellow cars and the green cars were bought, dismantled, and scrapped. The tracks were paved over. The infrastructure was gone. In 1949, General Motors and its co-conspirators were convicted of criminal conspiracy to monopolize the sale of buses and related products. The fine was $5,000. $5,000 for destroying the transit systems of 45 American cities. The streetcars never came back. 1956. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signs the Federal Aid Highway Act, the largest public works program in American history. 41,000 miles of interstate highway, $100 billion, connecting every major city on the continent. Eisenhower's inspiration was the German Autobahn, which he had seen during World War II and credited with giving the German military a decisive advantage in rapid troop movement. He wanted America to have the same capability, a national highway system that could move armies across the continent in days. What no one fully calculated was what those highways would do to the cities they passed through. The highways did not go around American cities. They went through them, and the neighborhoods they went through were almost never wealthy or white. They were black. They were working class. They were communities with the least political power to resist. In New Orleans, the Claiborne Avenue Expressway was built directly over the most prosperous black commercial street in the American South. Claiborne Avenue had been lined with ancient oak trees and hundreds of black-owned businesses. A street so vibrant it was known as the heart of black New Orleans. The highway killed it overnight. The oaks were cut down. The businesses closed. The community never recovered. In Nashville, Interstate 40 was deliberately routed through the historically black Jefferson Street neighborhood, destroying a music scene that had launched Jimi Hendrix, Little Richard, and Ike Turner. In the Bronx, city planner Robert Moses built the Cross Bronx Expressway through the heart of working-class communities, displacing 60,000 people. The South Bronx, once a thriving urban neighborhood, collapsed into poverty and abandonment so severe that President Carter visited in 1977 and compared it to the bombed cities of Europe. The highway didn't move cars through cities. It moved cars through the ruins of communities. Part 3, zoning locks it in. The highway destroyed communities. But there's another force that made American cities broken in a quieter, more bureaucratic, and ultimately more permanent way. Zoning. Most people have never thought about zoning. It sounds technical and boring. It is actually one of the most consequential and radical experiments in social engineering ever attempted in a democratic society. Zoning is the legal separation of land uses, residential zones, commercial zones, industrial zones, office zones. In a zone city, these categories cannot mix. You cannot build a shop in a residential neighborhood. You cannot build an apartment above a restaurant. You cannot build a cafe on a residential street. It is against the law. Think about what that means for a moment. Every European city you have ever loved, the corner cafe, the bakery at the end of the street, the small hotel above the restaurant, is illegal under American zoning law. Literally illegal. Zoning in America did not begin as a neutral planning tool. It began as a mechanism for racial segregation. The Supreme Court had ruled explicitly race-based housing segregation unconstitutional in 1917. So cities found another way. Zoning. By designating wealthy white neighborhoods as single-family residential zones, where only detached houses on large plots could be built. Cities effectively excluded anyone who could not afford a detached house on a large plot, which meant, in practice, black Americans and poor Americans. Richard Rothstein's 2017 book, The Color of Law, documents this in devastating detail. Zoning was not an accident or a neutral technical choice. It was a deliberate policy of exclusion enacted by local governments across the country with the explicit goal of keeping black families out of white neighborhoods. The built environment it created, the sprawling, segregated, car-dependent American suburb, is the physical legacy of that policy, and it is still there, still shaping where people live, how they move, and what opportunities are available to them. Zoning made American cities sprawl, but there is one specific zoning rule that made them truly irreparable: the parking minimum. Every American city requires new buildings provide a minimum number of parking spaces. A restaurant must have one parking space for every 3 seats. An office must have one space for every 300 square feet. A grocery store must have one space for every 200 square feet. The result is a city where an enormous proportion of the land is given over to storing empty cars. In Los Angeles, there are approximately 19 million parking spaces for 10 million cars. The parking lots cover more land than the city of Manhattan. Donald Shoup, the UCLA urban economist who has spent his career studying parking, calculated that the total value of free parking subsidized by American zoning law is greater than the entire defense budget of the United States. America is not just a country that loves cars. It is a country that has legally mandated that cars must be accommodated above all other priorities, including housing, including business, including the basic human desire to walk somewhere. Not everyone accepted this. One woman, more than any other, saw what was happening and fought it with a ferocity that changed the conversation entirely. Jane Jacobs was not an architect, not a planner, not an academic. She was a journalist who lived in Greenwich Village in New York and paid close attention to what was happening on her street. In 1961, she published The Death and Life of Great American Cities, one of the most important books ever written about urban life. In it, she identified exactly what made cities work and what was destroying them. Cities need density, she argued. They need mixed uses, shops and homes and offices all together. They need old buildings as well as new ones, because old buildings provide cheap space for the small businesses and artists that give neighborhoods their character. And they need short blocks, because short blocks mean more corners, more intersections, more opportunities to turn, explore, and encounter other people. Everything the post-war planners were doing, the highways, the towers, the separated uses, the superblocks, was the opposite of this. And she was right. Robert Moses, the most powerful urban planner in American history, wanted to run a highway through Washington Square Park in Greenwich Village. Jane Jacobs organized her neighbors, went to public meetings, made noise, and stopped him. One woman with no formal credentials defeated the most powerful planner in America and wrote the book that eventually changed the entire field. Part 4, The Human Cost. Car dependency is not just an aesthetic problem. It is not just about whether cities feel nice to walk through. It has concrete, measurable costs that fall hardest on the people least able to bear them. The average American household spends 19% of its income on transportation, more than it spends on food. In car-dependent suburbs, that figure rises to 25% or more. For a family earning $40,000 a year, that is $10,000 a year just to move around in a walkable European city. The same family might spend 3 to 5% of its income on transportation. The rest stays in their pocket. Car dependency is a poverty trap. It forces every household, rich or poor, to own and maintain an expensive machine just to participate in basic economic life. And when that machine breaks down, or when the insurance lapses, or when the license is suspended, the consequences can be catastrophic. People lose jobs because they cannot get to work. Children miss school because there is no bus. Elderly people become housebound because they can no longer drive. The car is presented as freedom. For many Americans, it is the opposite. Americans walk less than almost any population on Earth. The average American walks fewer than 4,000 steps a day. The average European walks 8 to 10,000. The difference is not willpower or culture. It is built environment. When there is nowhere to walk to, when the nearest shop is 2 miles away and the only way to reach it is a 6-lane road with no footpath, people do not walk. Not because they are lazy, but because the environment makes walking rational. The consequences are measurable. Americans are significantly more obese, more likely to have type 2 diabetes, more likely to have cardiovascular disease than their European counterparts. Urban sprawl has been directly linked to higher rates of obesity in study after study. The shape of the city is a public health crisis. Meanwhile, cities that have invested in walking and cycling have seen dramatic public health improvements. After Copenhagen built its cycling infrastructure, rates of cardiovascular disease in the city dropped measurably. After Oslo redesigned its streets for pedestrians, childhood obesity rates fell. The city is not just an economic environment, it is a health environment. And the design choices made by planners in the 1950s are still killing people today. Transportation is the single largest source of carbon emissions in the United States, accounting for 29% of total greenhouse gas emissions. The majority of that comes from personal vehicles. Cars, Europe, with comparable levels of economic development and living standards, produces roughly half the per capita transportation emissions of the United States. The difference is not that Europeans drive cleaner cars. It is that they drive less because their cities are designed so that driving is often unnecessary. Electric vehicles are frequently presented as a solution to transportation emissions, but electrifying a car-dependent city does not solve car dependency. It just changes the fuel. You still need the parking lots, the highways, the sprawl, the distances that make walking impossible. You still have the traffic deaths. 40,000 Americans die in car accidents every year, making the roads more dangerous than in any comparable nation. You still have the obesity. You still have the isolation. The problem is not what powers the car. The problem is that the car is the only option. Part 5. Can it be fixed? Some American cities are fighting back, slowly and perfectly, and against enormous resistance, but fighting back. Minneapolis made history in 2040. Its comprehensive plan, adopted in 2018, by becoming the first major American city to eliminate single-family zoning citywide. Every residential neighborhood in Minneapolis can now legally build apartment buildings. The supply of housing has increased. Rents have stabilized. Other cities are watching. Portland, Oregon built a light rail system and reorganized its zoning around transit stops, allowing dense, mixed-use development within walking distance of every station. It is not perfect, but it is working. Houston, paradoxically the most car-dependent large city in America, has virtually no formal zoning, and as a result, its inner neighborhoods are densifying rapidly and organically. Apartment buildings are appearing next to single-family houses. Shops are opening on residential streets. The city is, accidentally and chaotically, rediscovering mixed use. And then there is the most powerful force of all, demand. Young Americans, millennials and Generation Z, are moving to walkable urban neighborhoods at rates that are reshaping the real estate market. The most desirable and most expensive neighborhoods in every American city are the pre-car ones. Brooklyn, Capitol Hill in Seattle, the French Quarter in New Orleans, the North End in Boston, the Short North in Columbus. Over and over, the same pattern. The walkable, mixed-use, dense, human-scale neighborhood is the one everyone wants to live in, and there are not enough of them. Because zoning makes building more of them illegal, the demand for European-style urbanism in America is enormous, real, and largely unsatisfied. An entire generation of Americans grew up in suburbs, went to Europe, walked to a city that felt like a city, and came home asking, why can't we have this? The answer is zoning, parking minimums, highway investment, Political choices made 70 years ago that are still embedded in law. The good news is that laws can change. Something remarkable is happening in American cities right now. Highways built through urban neighborhoods in the 1950s and 60s are being torn down. San Francisco demolished the Embarcadero Freeway in 1991 after it was damaged in an earthquake, and the waterfront it revealed became one of the most valuable and beloved urban spaces in the city. Seoul, in South Korea, removed an elevated highway and restored the Cheonggyecheon stream beneath it. The surrounding neighborhood transformed almost overnight. Milwaukee removed its Park East Freeway in 2002. The land it freed up has since been developed with mixed-use urban blocks. Property values in the surrounding area increased by 18%. In Rochester, New York, the Inner Loop, an urban highway that ringed the downtown, was filled in and converted to a boulevard with cycle lanes and street trees. The first new buildings on the site appeared within 2 years. The evidence is now overwhelming. Removing urban highways does not increase traffic congestion. It reduces it. Traffic evaporates. People find other routes, use other modes, make different choices. The highway was not solving a problem. It was creating one. American cities are not broken because Americans are different from Europeans. They are not broken because of culture or climate or geography. They are broken because of specific decisions made by specific people at specific moments in history. Decisions that were not inevitable. Decisions that could have gone differently. Decisions that are still being made today. Every city is a set of choices. Choices about who it is for. Choices about what it values. Choices about what kind of life it makes possible. The European cities we explored in our last video took 2,000 years to build. They are the accumulated result of Roman engineers, medieval builders, Renaissance architects, Baroque kings, Victorian reformers, and heritage campaigners who decided, generation after generation, that what they had inherited was worth protecting and improving. American cities are young. They have time. The mistakes that were made in 50 years can slowly be unmade. Minneapolis is trying. Portland is trying. Houston is accidentally succeeding. And an entire generation of Americans is demanding something better. The blueprint is not fixed. It is being rewritten. And the cities that get it right will be the ones worth living in for the next 2,000 years. If this video made you think differently about the city you live in, subscribe. We are building a documentary channel about the hidden forces that shape the world around you. Every street, every building, every city has a story. We're going to tell them.